Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Watching Every Ghibli Movie. Today I watched Kaze Tachinu, or The Wind Rises. This film came out in 2013, and spoiler warning. To start off, I should mention that I kinda had this movie spoiled for me, at least thematically, and once you know the theme and the initial premise, it's pretty difficult to be surprised by this film, but luckily I didn't need to feel surprised to find The Wind Rises an extremely enjoyable watching experience anyway. This movie is technically astounding. I'd put it on par with Ponyo, the film that I consider to be the best looking in Ghibli's library, but I think if there were a specific word I would use to describe the presentation of this film, it would be rich. Rich with what, you might ask? I don't really know. All I know is that I could immediately feel just how soulful The Wind Rises was from the opening scene of Jiro, the main character, climbing up to the roof of his house and taking off in his personal little airplane to fly around his town. If you've seen that scene, you know what I'm talking about when I say the movie is rich. Interestingly, in that scene, the sound that the engine makes when it's sputtered instantly made me think of the sound that the little blow-up boat in Ponyo makes. The engine sounds in this movie in general are mesmerizing. It feels like someone was making the sound effects with their mouth, which combined with the visuals makes the planes completely come to life. Another difference that the spoilers might have made to my viewing experience was probably that I spotted foreshadowing easier than I would have otherwise. For instance, near the start of the film, Jiro's sister pesters him about wanting to do some activity with him that Jiro turns her down for, stating that he has work to do. But the specific phrasing that she uses is, "I want to pick bamboo grass, you promise to go with me," and knowing that this would be a film about Jiro over-investing into his passion, it was pretty clear that this was an indication of his primary character flaw from very early on. And I gotta say, it's pretty genius how this detail was slipped in. We immediately understand how passionate Jiro is about planes, and we don't see the conversation that Jiro and Kaio had in which he promised to go bamboo picking with her. So on a first viewing, you're probably thinking, look at this bratty child, doesn't she know how important this is to Jiro? She should just leave him alone. But once you have a fuller understanding of Jiro and his flaws, you can easily imagine the conversation that his sister and him had before the events of the film. And once you have that in mind, this interaction starts to look a lot more like Jiro is the one being unreasonable. Shifting gears, I want to talk about one of the negative things I have to say about this movie, that being the portrayal of Jiro and Naoko's relationship. So in the section of the movie where Naoko is introduced, Jiro goes out of his way to massively help her and her mom through the fallout of the train crash, and then he doesn't even tell them his name. He just moves on and goes over to the library to try and save books about planes. Plus, he was thinking about planes while literally carrying the mom who broke her leg. Then, several years later, Jiro saves Naoko's umbrella from blowing away in the wind and again doesn't seek any thanks or recognition. He only gets it when he wanders into the woods and finds Naoko, where she finally gets a proper greeting out of him. Also worth noting is that she seems to instantly recognize Jiro as the man who saved her and her mom, but he takes a second to recall the information. All of this, combined with the way that Jiro was constantly distracted by thinking about planes and constantly diverting his attention away from anything resembling the war and towards, whoa, look how cool planes are, made me feel like the film was trying to tell me that he was so consumed by his passion that he didn't even recognize the effects that his actions were having on the world, both positively and negatively, let alone recognize and reciprocate another person's romantic attraction. As such, it felt to me like Jiro's attraction towards Naoko just came out of nowhere, and I'm supposed to believe that he had been in love with her for long before they reunite halfway before the film? I feel like I must have missed something, because aside from this film is basically completely free of contrivances or contradictions. And it's not even like this one little thing completely ruins the film's themes for me, it just kinda takes it in a slightly adjacent but just as impactful direction. Rather than the message that focusing too much on your art will prevent you from forming meaningful connections in your life, it sends the message that doing so will destroy those connections. As is demonstrated when Jiro and Naoko collectively agree to basically just let her die so that the two of them can spend time together, and even then, Jiro will not take enough attention away from his work to devote to her. He's just so completely unable to occupy his mind with anything other than how amazing planes are. I feel like a lot of people will watch this movie and think that the theme has something to do with how an artist's vision will be corrupted by others or by the system in which they have to do their creating, but I don't think that's what The Wind Rises is about. Jiro knows what his planes are going to be used for. For him to pretend otherwise is foolish. He simply couldn't bring himself to stop building planes even after the point where it didn't seem like it was the artistic artistic passion project for him that it once was. The scene where he's in a meeting and talking about an amazing design for a plane that he had decided to shelf because it couldn't support the weight of the guns, to me was the indicator that he had started compromising his art. However, he wasn't willing to give up the opportunity to see his designs constructed, and so he just kept designing. I think it's a very subtle and yet important scene. About here, I'd like to point out a couple really cool details I noticed while watching that I just thought were so cool or interesting that I had to take notes of them. First was how in multiple scenes you can clearly hear the ambient sounds, footsteps, wind blowing, stuff like that. However, you cannot hear any voices even when background characters are very clearly speaking at what would be the same volume as those ambient noises. It's a really cool effect that really gets you into the headspace of Jiro. He's almost always lost in his own world. Other people constantly need to repeat themselves or shake his shoulder to get his attention. In a similar vein, there's also the scene where he is being brought into the aeronautical engineer's office, and we get to see a group of people who are seemingly having a discussion about some plane design, and they all kinda seem distressed and much more serious. But then we cut to the other side of the room and we see a bunch of guys each at their own desk looking totally content, and a few of them even have smiles on their faces. I wonder if that was meant to be a sort of encapsulation of how artists tend to be. We love to just sit and create without anybody putting restrictions on us. But once we have rules placed over our heads, once we have other people who seem to have a different idea of what would work than us, we get a lot more uncomfortable, even though that's the reality of the situation. You can't just spend all your time at your desk drawing planes. You have to make something that would actually fly and something that meets the requirements set for you. One more, and this one is less of a this movie detail and more of a Studio Ghibli in general detail, which is the fact that this movie starts out with the protagonist's early morning routine. And thinking back to other Ghibli films, it's actually a pretty common way that they introduce us to the main character. It happens in Castle of the Sky, it happens in From Up on Poppy Hill, it happens in The Cat Returns, it kinda happens in Porco Rosso. Obviously, it's not a super original idea that Ghibli created by any stretch, it was just a cool connection I saw in this film and their previous ones. But yeah, I guess Studio Ghibli likes early risers. I'm sure there are a ton more details you could point out in The Wind Rises, especially with stuff like background characters. Seriously, this film has never even heard of CG crowd shots. But I definitely got a bit less engaged as the film went on. I've talked about this before, but when a movie is long, I start to lose focus and even fall asleep even when I'm enjoying the movie, so I probably wasn't as great at spotting those finer details in the second half. Also, I felt obligated to mention this. I just realized that I'm nearsighted and I am scheduled to go to the optometrist literally 2 days from when I'm writing this script, so thanks for reminding me of that, Studio Ghibli. Also, the song they played over the credits was really good. Also, I still don't know what it means for the wind to rise. They say it a bunch of times in the movie and I can't figure it out. Help. Overall, I enjoyed The Wind Rises a whole heck of a lot. Although I have a few minor gripes with it, I found it very compelling, and I'm going to give this one a solid 8 out of 10. As always, I'd love to hear what you thought of this one, assuming you're watching along with me or had already seen this film. And stick around for the next episode of Watching Every Ghibli Movie, where I will be talking about Kaguya Hime no Monogatari, or The Tale of Princess Kaguya. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.